I'm Susan Downs. Welcome to the Silicon Valley Health Institute. We are a nonprofit institution or group that wants to get leading health information out to the public so you can use it and be proactive in your health. As you know, just because you get normal values from your doctor or they're within normal range, that is not the most reassuring because those values are based on 95% of the population. And as you know, we've got a very ill population. Chronic diseases have skyrocketed. Chronic diseases, even in children, has skyrocketed. And what is going on here? I mean, a lot of it can be due to the toxic soup, but I mean, any undigested proteins in your body gets into your system, and you get the genetic material similar to what's in the body, and through molecular mimicry autoimmune disease starts. So once we're on that path, we can be on the path for many more. So this is an important topic. So we will address this as one of the world's leading experts. So today we have Akil Palanisamy. I will just call him Dr. Akil because my pronunciation is
Sure.
challenged. And he is a Harvard-trained physician who practiced integrative medicine, blending his conventional medical expertise with holistic approaches, including functional medicine and Ayurveda. By the way, he wrote a book on Ayurvedic diet that combines good dietetic advice with your Ayurvedic type, whether it be Pitta, Vata, whatever, and that can help make your diet more special to your condition. So that's a book worth looking into. His most recent book is The Tiger Protocol. Well, he got his MD from the University of California, San Francisco, and completed a family medicine residency training at Stanford. He graduated from a fellowship in integrative medicine with Dr. Andrew Weil at the University of Arizona and received certification in mind-body medicine from the Georgetown University Center. He's a department chair for integrative medicine at the Sutter Health Institute for Health and Healing. He also serves as their physician director for community education and leads their educational initiatives and programs. He's been a consultant for the medical board for California for many years. He's a widely known speaker and educator. He's the author of The Tiger Protocol, his latest book, and the Paleovedic diet. This is a complete program to burn fat, increase energy, and reverse disease. He's done work for 2+ decades, and he's been seeing patients and conducts clinical research studies in the San Francisco Bay Area. In his free time, he enjoys playing tennis, traveling, and spending time with his wife and daughter. So welcome, Dr. Akil. Welcome to the Silicon Valley Health Institute.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Downs. I'm excited to be here. And so let me go ahead and share my screen to start the presentation, which is going to be about the Tiger Protocol. And this is something that I've actually been researching for the past 4 years, and then finally completed my book, which was launched earlier this year. So I'm very excited to share the information with everyone. So here's the outline for today. We're going to first look at the science behind the Tiger Protocol. What does the research, the medical literature say? And then in the second part, we're going to focus on the practical implementation. So what are the foods that are healing? What are the concrete steps you can take, today to help address these 5 causes? And then we'll have a Q&A and some discussion. So the word TIGER is an acronym for these 5 drivers of inflammation and all chronic disease. T is toxins, I is infections, G is the gut, E refers to eating and diet, and R refers to rest, which includes good sleep and also managing stress effectively. I think both of those are important. I always like to start with a case. So this is a patient that I saw in my practice. Currently, I'm practicing in Sacramento. I practiced in San Francisco for many years. Maria was a 40-year-old Hispanic woman who was dealing with the autoimmune issue psoriasis, which is a skin disorder that's autoimmune. And then she had a variety of metabolic issues as well, like high blood pressure, obesity, insulin resistance, and fatty liver. And interesting note about fatty liver. I heard recently that now 2 billion people worldwide are diagnosed with fatty liver, and this is a huge increase, obviously, from years prior. And we'll talk about some of the causes of that, because it's not just obesity; it's also the microbiome, it's the environmental toxins, it's all of these other hidden factors. So Maria was diagnosed with gestational diabetes after her first pregnancy. And then later on, after several years, she developed metabolic syndrome, which is defined by high blood pressure, insulin resistance, obesity, and then she developed signs of a fatty liver. She had abnormally high liver enzyme blood tests. Yeah, that is something that is related to the insulin resistance. And now at 40 years old, even daily use of topical steroids was not solving her psoriasis. So she did not have any GI symptoms, but I always like to test the microbiome in most people, especially if they have an autoimmune condition. And her microbiome was highly disrupted, with her tests showing significant intestinal permeability. We'll talk more about that. Also, high levels of a harmful bacteria called Pseudomonas, which promotes inflammation, and low levels of many of her good bacteria, bifidobacteria, lactobacillus, Akkermansia, which is a more recently discovered bacteria. And also she had low levels of butyrate. This is the most important metabolite that should be produced by your gut bacteria. It's called a short chain fatty acid. There's 4 of them that your gut bacteria are supposed to be producing if all is well and they're getting the right diet and they're in balance. And butyrate is probably the most important of those 4. So the fact that that was low was very concerning for her immunity, her inflammation, and all her chronic diseases. So we'll come back to Maria a bit later on in terms of what I did for her and the treatment approach. But first, let me provide some background about autoimmune disease. So 1 in 5 Americans now suffers from some form of autoimmune condition. It's the fastest growing category of disease. In fact, there's been a 300% increase in some autoimmune diseases just in the past decade. So clearly, we know it can't be genetic, because genes take millions of years to work and change. So I think environment and the other factors we're going to talk about are big factors. So now hundreds of millions of people worldwide are actually struggling with autoimmunity, and the prevalence and cost of autoimmune disease is greater than heart disease, cancer, and diabetes combined. And this is partly because there's more than 100 different autoimmune diseases. Even though they share the same 5 underlying mechanisms, the manifestation could be very different depending on which end organ is affected. Is it the heart? Is it the skin? Is it the gut? Is it the brain? And the problem with our conventional approach to autoimmune disease, which is very siloed, is that the patient is assigned a specialist depending on which end organ is affected, whether that be neurologist, gastroenterologist, rheumatologist, dermatologist, and they don't address the upstream drivers of that process. And that's what I think people should learn about, and that's my work currently. So let's begin with a deep dive into toxins, which I do believe are the missing piece of the puzzle for a number of issues. Globally, over 350,000 chemicals are registered. In the US, there are 86,000 that the EPA recognizes, and of which 42,000 are in active use. And most of these have not been tested for long-term safety. Chemicals are considered innocent until proven guilty in the US. And sometimes they are tested for acute toxicity. What is a lethal dose? And, obviously then they're used in much lower doses to make sure it's not going to be acutely toxic. But no one is really testing the chronic low-level exposure, and to not just one, but multiple toxins, which is the norm now for all of us. And that is very hard to study because you need very long times, long windows to observe that, and then also getting funding for that kind of research is hard because it's not something that a drug company is going to profit from, like a new pharmaceutical or something like that. So we don't have enough research on that low level exposure. So let's begin with the example of water. So this is all the reasons why it's good to filter your drinking water, and we can talk more about that. So 45 states had perchlorate, which is an environmental toxin in the water. More than 50 million Americans had water potentially contaminated by pesticides and other agricultural chemicals. There was an Associated Press investigation which found more than 40 million Americans drinking water contained pharmaceuticals, including antibiotics, hormonal drugs, and psychiatric medicines. A lot of times people flush these unused medicines down the toilet, and then the municipal water companies are not set up to really filter out a lot of these, so they end up that way in the drinking water. And finally, a Harvard study found 6 million people exposed to an elevated toxin category called PFAs in drinking water. And so I typically recommend a reverse osmosis system for filtering water. Those are fairly affordable. They can be installed in the kitchen. And, I don't recommend plastic bottled water because of the plastic, which leads to microplastics and other toxins. But just, using the water at home, but making sure you have a good filter like the either reverse osmosis system, or another good option is the Berkey. Berkey water filters are well known for their effective filtration. And then something people often overlook is to also install a filter in the shower, because with the hot water, a lot of toxins can get aerosolized. And I think Berkey offers a shower filter. There's many other companies. So I think, you don't need necessarily like a whole house filter, but the drinking water in the kitchen and the showers is what I recommend. So this is a quote by Douglas Kerr, who's a neurologist at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. And he said, there's universal agreement among scientists and physicians that the environmental toxins to which we are increasingly exposed are interfering with the immune system's ability to distinguish self from non-self. And most of the risk of autoimmunity comes from environmental exposures rather than from genetic susceptibilities. And that's why we're seeing such an increase in autoimmunity, because of the change in our environment, the increase in these environmental exposures. So the top researchers in the field are very much thinking this way, that these toxins in the environment are disrupting our immune function and contributing to autoimmunity and other immune dysregulation. And there is also synergistic harm from toxins. So in my book, I review 20 toxins that have each individually been linked to increased risk of autoimmune disease. But then the problem is when we combine toxins, which is what happens in real life, it's not just 1 + 1 = 2. You get 1 + 1 = 3 because of these synergistic effects between multiple toxins when they get to higher levels. So this is a newer area of research, but it is being studied now, which I think is great. So their studies have looked at a synergistic interaction between heavy metals and pesticides, which when both present can cause a significantly higher level of cell damage than when each is present individually. So that's a concern based on the interaction that is also not well studied between these multiple toxins. But is it a moot point? Maybe we don't really carry many toxins anyway. But a study found that there were more than 100 toxins elevated in an average American, total of 155 toxins detected, including pesticides, heavy metals, industrial compounds, polychlorinated biphenyls, and more. And then interestingly, none of these subjects in these studies had any occupational or residential risks for these exposures. They were not factory workers. They did not live near a toxic waste site. They didn't live near a freeway. They didn't have any known exposures or risk factors. They were just average Americans. And yet the typical level was about more than 100 toxins elevated in each person. So this is the low level, but over time, I think that they can have an impact. And even children, like babies, are affected. So scientists found an average of 200 toxins in blood tests of newborn babies born in US hospitals. They test something called the umbilical cord blood, which is a easy way to sample from newborns. And they found many of the toxins that increase the risk of autoimmunity. For example, pesticides, some heavy metals, flame retardants, which are found in a lot of furniture now, PFCs, and other industrial toxins. So yeah, and this could be from in utero exposure, through the mother, and then yeah. So it just shows that there's we need to work on both our children and our adults to improve those numbers. So yeah, this figure is a little bit busy, but I think it makes some important points, which are that these same toxins also drive obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. So on the upper left, you see what are called obesogens. And these are low levels of environmental toxins that have been shown to promote obesity, weight gain, and so forth. I think that's a hidden reason why we have such an obesity epidemic, and also for many people why it's hard to lose weight. And so for some patients, I found that really addressing toxins, doing a lot of detox, actually can help them to lose weight. Second on the left are diabetogens. So these are a class of toxins that promote insulin resistance, glucose intolerance, the fatty liver I was talking about, elevated insulin levels. So exposure to toxins is a known risk factor for development of type 2 diabetes. It's not recognized in the conventional model where diabetes is just thought to be related to diet and lack of exercise, but toxins are actually a big contributing factor. And then finally, we have cardiovascular disruptors. So these are the factors that can contribute over time to heart disease. So heart disease is still the #1 killer of people worldwide and in the US, and toxins are increasingly being studied for their role in disrupting cardiovascular function. So I think toxins are relevant not just to autoimmunity, but really all of our challenging chronic diseases like obesity, heart disease, and type 2 diabetes. So this just kind of shows the same data in a simplified form, how the obesogens, diabetogens, and heart disease factors contribute to drive these same 3 chronic diseases. So I think that in order to reduce the risk of all chronic diseases, not just autoimmune disease, we have to really pay attention to toxins and both reduce exposure and boost our detox capacity. So we're going to be talking a lot more about that in part 2 of the presentation, how to support, enhance your intrinsic detox pathways, because your body does have those built in. We just want to kind of support them as best as we can. Now, I want to acknowledge that you might find this data overwhelming, but I do think it's crucial to understand it. And my goal is to empower you with the information. The goal is not to live a completely toxin-free life. That is impossible. You can't really live in a bubble. You have to live in the real world. And practically speaking, you can't completely avoid exposure to toxins, But that's not necessary either. Your body has those pathways. You can enhance that detox capacity. And the goal is just to do what is possible, and reasonable, and also not to do things in a way that it's stressful for you. We don't want to add more stress to your life, but just doing what's feasible is what I recommend. And the research shows that there is real power in healing toxins. So there was a published case where a woman with rheumatoid arthritis had a complete resolution of symptoms after a year of chelation therapy, removed high levels of cadmium, which is one of the heavy metals I discuss in my book that contributes to autoimmunity. This was a complete resolution of symptoms, which is pretty rare in rheumatoid arthritis. And it's thought that the toxins were the biggest factor for this published case. Another patient with multiple sclerosis, this is an autoimmune disease where the body attacks its like the brain, nervous system, spinal cord. He was unsuccessfully treated for years with conventional medications, which are generally the strong immune suppressing drugs like steroids or biologics. Those are that's the necessary, often life-saving. But in his case, the conventional medications were not controlling his symptoms. And he was found eventually to have elevated levels of mercury, lead, and aluminum in urine testing, which is often a bit more reliable than blood testing for heavy metals. Which is a good way to start, but blood testing shows typically more recent exposures. And in his case, treatment with an oral chelation agent led to gradual improvement of symptoms and remission in his MS. So let's go on to the eye in tiger, the infections. So the most common and well-studied are bacterial imbalances, but there are some other infections that we're going to talk about, like mycobacteria, viruses, fungi, and parasites. So any type of microbe can actually contribute to autoimmunity and disrupt a balance of your immune system. Mycobacteria are most well known for their role in tuberculosis. That's Mycobacterium tuberculosis, or TB. And all mycobacteria are known for their thick cell walls, which allow them to lay dormant, sometimes for decades, and make them resistant to antibiotics, which is why for TB, you often need, 3, 4, 5 drugs at the same time. And then also you might have dormant, also known as latent tuberculosis, that can persist for decades until it's treated. And there's a different mycobacteria that is implicated in autoimmune disease called Mycobacterium avium paratuberculosis, or the MAP bacteria. And there is strong data for type 1 diabetes. So a review of 7 studies shows an association between MAP infection early in life and the development of type 1 diabetes. And a potential mechanism has been identified. This is called molecular mimicry, which just looking at the big picture, molecular mimicry is one of the key mechanisms for many autoimmune diseases that has been identified. So in the case of the MAP bacteria, the antibodies against the MAP mycobacteria produced by the immune system cross-react with a protein found in the beta cells of the pancreas that secrete insulin. So the molecular mimicry refers to the similarity in those two structures. For some reason, those antibodies that are matching the proteins on the MAP bacteria are identical, and they match the proteins on the pancreas. So that's where you get the cross reaction and contribution to autoimmunity. And MAP bacteria are often found in cow's milk and cows, and sometimes they can even survive pasteurization at normal, high temperatures. They're very hardy and resistant, have the thick cell walls. So the MAP contamination of milk might explain the correlation between cow's milk exposure and the development of childhood type 1 diabetes that is seen in some studies. So that is being looked into as one of the reasons why cow's milk may be associated with development of type 1 diabetes. Also, mycobacteria are studied in inflammatory bowel disease, which is an autoimmune gut disease, such as Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, microscopic colitis. A review of 10 studies found that individuals with Crohn's disease were between 2 to 7 times more likely to test positive for MAP when compared to healthy adults. And one of the problems we run into when studying mycobacteria are they are very hard to culture, hard to study, hard to get good staining methods to identify them. That's what makes TB, difficult to diagnose. But we have newer staining methods that are addressing this shortcoming. So a more recent study used a new staining method to look for the MAP bacteria in intestinal biopsies of patients with Crohn's disease. And they found 18 out of 18, 100% of Crohn's disease patients tested positive, whereas MAP was found in exactly 0%, 0 out of 15 samples from healthy controls. So certainly, we need more research because the early data indicates that mycobacteria are playing a key role in multiple autoimmune conditions. So in addition to the microbiome, which is the gut bacteria, we now know there's a mycobiome, which refers to fungal species. And we each have about 250 or 260 different fungal organisms throughout the body and in the GI tract. And of course, the one that is most well known and most studied is Candida. And this is being investigated for its role in the development of multiple sclerosis, other autoimmune conditions, other neurological conditions. And one study showed that infection with 3 different species of Candida was each independently associated with higher odds of having multiple sclerosis. So there are different strains, different species of Candida, some more pathogenic than others, but 3 of them have been independently associated with higher odds of MS. And a study of Crohn's disease also suggests that Candida may be one of the initiators in the inflammatory process. So recall, this is the inflammatory bowel disease that is autoimmune. It is known that bacterial dysbiosis, which we'll talk about, is an imbalance of bacteria, is a contributing factor to Crohn's disease. And now fungal dysbiosis with Candida is also being implicated. And Candida is being examined for its possible role in celiac disease because of molecular mimicry between gluten and one of the proteins on the yeast surface. So both that protein and gluten look very similar. So when antibodies are produced against the yeast, they cross-react with gluten if it's coming from the diet. And that's thought to be one of the factors in the development of celiac disease. So let's talk more about the gut, which is really the foundation of overall health and the foundation of immune health. And we always start with the microbiome, which refers to the 40 trillion bacteria from more than 1,000 species that we have in our gut. And we have about 40 trillion human cells. So we really are 50% bacterial, 50% human, like a true superorganism. And we have also 23,000 known human genes, but there are more than 1 million genes among all of these bacteria that can be turned on or off and impact, all of our different organ systems. And 60% of your immune system is physically located in the gut, in what is called the gut-associated lymphoid tissue. And increased intestinal permeability, also known as leaky gut, is a key factor, which we're going to be talking about more. So what are some of the classic gut findings in autoimmune disease? So we have reduced diversity of the microbiome. We know that normal, healthy microbiome should be very diverse. That's one of the key markers for health of the microbiome, and also important for longevity, because they found that the longest lived people, tend to have very diverse microbiomes. Second is dysbiosis, which we'll talk about in the upcoming slide. And then finally is the increased intestinal permeability or leaky gut. So when they've studied multiple different autoimmune diseases across the board, these same three factors appear to be the hallmarks of autoimmune conditions. So let's look at dysbiosis. So on the left, when you have a balanced gut microbiota, you have plenty of beneficial bacteria, and they outweigh any harmful or opportunistic bacteria. And as long as the harmful bacteria are kept in check, often they don't pose an issue. You know, they just are present. We don't have to completely eradicate them. You know, like the Western model of maybe being a little bit too aggressive at killing germs. But then when you get an imbalance, it shifts to the right, where you get a decline in the beneficial bacteria and an increase in the harmful or opportunistic bacteria. And that is what is called dysbiosis. And factors that can lead to that, high fat, high sugar diets, trans fats, antibiotic use, being sedentary, because exercise has a strong effect on the gut bacteria. Stress also has a direct harmful effect on the microbiome. So all these factors can lead to the dysbiosis. And then on the lower right of the screen, you see the consequences of that, which include increased gut permeability, systemic inflammation, as well as gut inflammation, insulin resistance, weight gain, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, heart disease, fatty liver, inflammatory bowel disease, irritable bowel syndrome, and more. There's actually many conditions now that are being linked to this dysbiosis. So it just shows how important this imbalance can be. And this is what is seen in autoimmune conditions. So just to take an example, we will look at the autoimmune hepatitis. And so this is from a paper that looked at intestinal permeability in patients with autoimmune hepatitis. So on the bottom of the screen are different bacteria that were studied: Bifidobacterium, Lactobacillus, which are beneficial bacteria, and then E. coli and Enterococcus, which are more of the neutral or opportunistic bacteria. So, and then in terms of the color scheme, that's on the right. Blue is healthy controls. The teal is autoimmune hepatitis with normal liver function. Green is autoimmune hepatitis with abnormal liver function. And gray is the AIH with cirrhosis, which is the end stage of liver damage. And with each bacteria, as you progress from left to right, from mild to severe, especially with Bifidobacterium and Lactobacillus, there is a significant drop as the autoimmune disease progresses, and eventually, you're getting towards cirrhosis. That drop was not seen in the opportunistic bacteria, which remained the same, like the E. coli and Enterococcus. So it just shows that this decline of beneficial bacteria, part of dysbiosis, is a factor in autoimmune disease, such as in this example. Also, the condition of leaky gut, which is intestinal permeability, was studied in the same paper. And they, again, looked at patients all the way from healthy controls to normal liver function, then abnormal liver function, and finally cirrhosis. And that's going from blue on the left to gray. And what they used to assess the leaky gut is a blood plasma level of LPS, lipopolysaccharide. So lipopolysaccharide, which is also called endotoxin, is something that is produced in the gut. It's part of the cell wall of gram-negative bacteria, and it's highly inflammatory, highly toxic. So the body normally really limits how much LPS gets into the bloodstream. But if you get a leaky gut, the levels can go higher and higher, as pictured here. And the body thinks of LPS as a signal for sepsis, which is a life-threatening bacterial infection. So whenever the immune system sees LPS, it gets thrown into overdrive, and that's what is being caused by this leaky gut and in the autoimmune process. So here's a schematic about the leaky gut. So in the middle are the cells which line the intestinal barrier. In blue on the right is the mucus layer, which you can see is should be nice and thick. But at the top of the screen, you see there's a gap between the two intestinal cells, and the mucus layer has thinned there. And then entering the bloodstream, which is on the left of the screen, are the microbes like bacterial antigens, toxins, undigested cells, LPS, all these things that are not supposed to be getting into the blood. And so in this paper, they identified that the increased intestinal permeability leads to translocation of bacterial components and products across the gut barrier into the circulation. And such microbial translocation can subsequently trigger an abnormal immune response, causing inflammation and or tissue damage in extraintestinal organs. So as they entered the bloodstream and these compounds circulate, depending on where they end up, whether it's brain, heart, kidney, gut, wherever, they can trigger inflammation and damage in those areas. So that's the mechanism between how leaky gut then leads to systemic effects in organs quite distant from the gut. Now we're talking about these 5 causes like they're separate factors, but they do interact. So for example, phthalate, which is a common toxin from plastics, altered the microbiome composition and diversity in newborns, and also changed their immune responses. So this toxin impacted the gut microbiome significantly. Also, with the example of glyphosate, we found that this is one of the most common pesticides used worldwide. But initially, it was brought to the market as an antibiotic. And then later, they changed the labeling to more of a pesticide effect. But it still has those antibiotic effects. And it's particularly problematic because as an antibiotic, is quite poor in the worst way. So it does not really kill or damage the harmful bacteria, but it has a negative harmful effect on the good bacteria. Obviously glyphosate is ubiquitous, but that's one of the reasons why I encourage my patients to try to eat organic, to limit exposure to glyphosate because of those disruptive effects on the microbiome. Okay, now let's talk about eating, and I break it up into my phase 1 and phase 2 diet. So the phase 1 diet in the Tiger Protocol is more of an elimination diet, where for 2 or 3 months, you're eating a more restricted diet. But at this stage, it's very beneficial to add some healing foods. So even though you're eliminating, gluten, dairy, sugar, a few like inflammatory foods like that, you can add plant foods that help with the healing of the gut and reduction of inflammation. And the compound sulforaphane is one of them, which we'll talk about in the next slide. But the richest food source of this is broccoli sprouts. So broccoli, of course, very nutritious. All cruciferous vegetables are great. The cauliflower, Brussels sprouts. But compared to broccoli sprouts can actually have up to 100 times as much sulforaphane. And if you are having cooked cruciferous vegetables of any type, a trick to increase sulforaphane is to add a source of this enzyme called myrosinase, which is the enzyme that synthesizes the sulforaphane. And a good way to do it is brown mustard seed powder. So in one study, when 1 gram, which I think is like a 1/4 teaspoon or half teaspoon of brown mustard powder was added to cooked broccoli, the bioavailability of sulforaphane increased by more than 400%. So great way to kind of boost the sulforaphane that you're getting. And more than 2,000 research studies have documented the amazing benefits of sulforaphane. It reduces inflammation. It activates the NRF2 pathway to do that. Also boosts the immune system. It increases the activity of your immune cells called natural killer cells, which are very important for addressing infections. Also enhances brain function. It's an excellent antioxidant, so it reduces oxidative stress. And it has antimicrobial activity against those pathogenic species. So here's a picture of the gut microbiome, and you can see, it's very photogenic. And on the lower right are the organism, the human cells in blue, and on the left upper part of the screen are all the bacteria. Um, does anyone know what the green layer is in between? Maybe you could type it into the chat if you know what this thick green layer is that is between all the bacteria, which are very densely packed, and our human cells. Um, so this is actually the mucus layer. And this is secreted by your intestinal cells, and it's a very important barrier to prevent leaky gut. So that old saying, good fences make good neighbors applies to the gut as well. You want to have a really good fence in terms of this mucus layer. Um, and um, and then with our bacteria, we know their biggest food source is fiber from plants in our diet. And why does that matter? It's because our fiber intake over the years has really drastically declined. So the best estimates for hunter-gatherer societies, where we lived for a couple million years in that model, they've looked at anthropological evidence. They've looked at anthropological excavation sites, and then also some modern hunter-gatherer societies to look at their diet, which is often very rich in these starchy tubers, like pictured here, that are very high in fiber. So typical daily intake was about a minimum 100 up to 200 grams of fiber. And then over time, with the advent of agriculture 10,000 years ago, declined to about 35 grams. And then the modern processed, SAD diet, standard American diet, average person only gets 15 grams of fiber per day. So you can see it's more than a 90% drop in the fiber and in the food source for the bacteria that are so important in our microbiome. And so what happens when the bacteria are deprived of their food source? Well, they start to consume a part of us that is our mucus layer. So basically, that was shown in this study. There are two different scenarios. The left picture is an image of a healthy microbiome in a standard diet with plenty of fiber. The yellow is the fiber that's pictured there. So again, blue are the host cells. Green is the healthy, thick mucus layer. And then you have the lumen, or the inside of the intestine, on the right, which is filled with plenty of fibers, yellow. And then the bacteria are kind of spread out throughout there. But then when you deprive the microbiome of fiber and have a what's called a MAC deficient diet, MAC is microbiome accessible carbohydrate deficient diet, then you get the scenario on the left. So you can see all those yellow fibers have kind of disappeared, and then the mucus layer has thinned quite significantly, because the bacteria have then adapted to, start consuming that, because they're not getting the food from the diet, they're not getting enough fiber. And that is one of the hallmarks of the modern microbiome, is a shift in bacterial consumption from fiber in the diet to the mucus layer. And then that just makes it much more likely to run into leaky gut or other problems with the gut barrier integrity. So that just illustrates, the role of plant fibers, which we're going to be talking about more. So we'll come back to that, but let's talk a bit more about rest. So this is a key root cause, not only for the initial occurrence of autoimmunity, but also does drive flare-ups and exacerbations of autoimmune illness. Studies have found consistently stress is involved in development as well as progression of multiple autoimmune diseases, MS, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, autoimmune hepatitis, Graves' disease. I often see patients that tell me, yes, when I went through this very stressful period in my life, then I finally got diagnosed with the autoimmune disease. It's often the final, like the straw that breaks the camel's back in terms of the immune process. But it is shown addressing stress improves outcomes in autoimmunity. So there is hope. So, a study in inflammatory bowel disease patients found that 9 weeks of mindfulness meditation training literally changed the expression of their genes, especially those involved in inflammation, cell growth, and oxidative stress. So, meditation can favorably alter your gene expression in autoimmunity. So, a lot of these things we're talking about are epigenetic changes. So, not obviously changing your genes, which is hard to do, but changing the expression of those genes, and that is epigenetics. And meditation is actually a proven way to do that. Okay, now we're going to shift into the practical implementation of the Tiger Protocol. We'll talk about toxins and detoxification. We'll discuss my approach to infections. We'll heal your gut microbiome as well as the oral microbiome. The oral microbiome in the mouth is the second biggest microbiome in the body and also very important. One quick tip on a food that's great for both is actually green tea. So, green tea is very high in these polyphenols, which are prebiotics that feed your oral microbiome bacteria and the gut microbiome. And that's how they reduce the risk of heart disease, they boost your microbiome's diversity. So I tell my patients to just swish around the green tea in their mouth before swallowing, and that way they'll benefit both the oral microbiome and the gut microbiome. We'll talk about eating, and prebiotic foods are not as well known as fermented foods. Prebiotic foods have fibers that feed your good bacteria, and they're a big part of my phase 2 diet, which is more of the long-term diet with a lot of diversity. And we'll discuss some tools for optimizing rest and managing stress. So at the beginning, we presented the case of Maria, who was struggling. This was a patient in my practice. She was dealing with obesity, fatty liver, psoriasis that was not responding to the conventional treatment, which is topical steroid creams. So based on my testing of her gut microbiome, you recall she had bacterial overgrowth. I started her on a gut healing protocol with the prebiotic foods. And in terms of supplements, I used neem capsules. Neem is an herb from Ayurveda, which is the traditional medicine of India. Very good antimicrobial, antibacterial, fungal, yeast, parasites, quite effective. And then I had her increase a variety of these red colored foods like red quinoa, red rice, pomegranate, cranberry, and pomegranate juice if she could not get whole pomegranates. All these red colored foods feed Akkermansia, which is one of those keystone species, the beneficial bacteria that's especially good for metabolic issues. And then repeat testing showed that her Pseudomonas bacterial overgrowth had resolved. A couple months later, her Akkermansia levels were now above average, and her keystone bacteria, including lactobacillus and bifidobacteria, improved. And then because the bacteria improved, the metabolites that they were supposed to be producing had increased, like the short chain fatty acids, especially butyrate, had come up nicely. And then her intestinal permeability markers were normalizing. So what she found was that previously ineffective weight loss strategies began to work. She lost weight and returned to a normal BMI. So studies show that that's one consequence of improving the microbiome, especially if you can boost the Akkermansia bacteria to a high level that makes any weight loss approach more likely to work, whether it's intermittent fasting, calorie restriction, increased exercise. So addressing the microbiome can really support that process. And then blood sugar and blood pressure improved. Her abnormal liver enzymes returned to normal levels, indicating reduction in liver inflammation and the fatty liver. And then finally, the psoriasis began to respond to the topical steroids that she had been using, and her condition improved and stabilized. So let's talk about the toxins. And in terms of reducing toxin exposure, there's a few simple steps you can take. So one is opt for organic food whenever possible. I know it's not possible all the time because of cost and availability. I like to refer people to the Environmental Working Group. They have a couple of lists they publish every year called the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. So the Dirty Dozen are the 12 foods that are most highest in pesticides that you should try to get organic. And the Clean 15 are foods that generally are lower in pesticides. And so it's okay to get conventional if for those foods. So yeah, that's a nonprofit that publishes those lists online. Filtering your drinking water, of course, is very important. Either a reverse osmosis system or a Berkey water filter is an option. And then for those who are, living in an apartment or not able to install a system in their home, you can get the Zero water filter, a ZERO water filter, which looks just like a Brita filter, same cost. But independent studies have shown that it's more effective at filtering toxins. So the Zero water filter is another good option. And then opening windows at home for increased air exchange is very important because household dust has been shown to carry some of the toxins that are found indoors. And also removing your shoes indoors, so leaving them at the front door, is important because they have actually studied the bottoms of shoes and found they can carry lead, pesticides, harmful bacteria from outside. So you don't want to be tracking those in, throughout your house. And then regularly dusting and vacuuming inside. Also, declining receipts or choosing electronic receipts can reduce exposure to BPA. So this is a toxin that is found in most receipts. And people who handle receipts a lot, like cashiers, have been found to have increased blood levels of BPA. So it does get absorbed over time through the skin. So just don't handle receipts too much if you do get them, or choose other options like electronic receipts. Now, the good news is that there is great power in reducing toxin exposure, and sometimes the effects can be quite rapid. So studies show that consuming or switching to a mostly organic diet can lower pesticide levels in the urine by 80% in 5 days. And then another source of toxins is personal care products like our lotions, cosmetics, anything you put on the skin. And in those, avoiding phthalates, parabens, and triclosan lowered levels by 45% in just 3 days. And finally, hand washing and removing dust in the home can lower flame retardants in the urine by 43% in just 1 week. So that's something that, especially for children, just making sure they're washing their hands before eating in the house is a good way to reduce a little bit of that toxin exposure that gets picked up from household dust. Now, when we're talking about detoxifying, we should remember what I call the pre-tox steps, which is the kind of basic foundation that needs to be in place before you detox. One is hydration. So you want to make sure you're drinking plenty of water, ideally at least half of your body weight in pounds, in ounces. So if you're 150 pounds, you want to drink at least 75 ounces of water throughout the day. And then daily elimination, because that's where the liver packages toxins and puts them in the bile, and it goes into the stool, and that should be excreted. So daily elimination is very important. And finally, sweating is really under-recognized as a strategy. So there's great research on saunas now. Sweating has been found in research to be confirmed to be able to excrete lead, mercury, arsenic, cadmium, pesticides, flame retardants like PBDEs, BPA, phthalates, PCBs. So you'll recall these are a lot of the toxins I've been talking about that have been linked to chronic disease, autoimmune disease, and it seems like sweating is a particularly good way to excrete a lot of them. In fact, there was a study that compared sweating in a sauna to sweating induced by exercise, because sometimes my patients tell me, oh, I sweat a lot when I, go jogging. But they found that sauna use led to better excretion in the sweat for several toxins. And so I tell patients, even if they are exercising, still valuable to add a sauna, at least a couple times a week. And the theory behind this is that when your body's heated from an external source, whether it be sauna, steam room, infrared sauna, the toxins that are often stored right below the skin, the subcutaneous tissue, they are more easily excreted in the sweat. Whereas if you're heating the body internally from exercise, it doesn't have quite the same effect on those toxins stored near the skin surface. So yeah, I'm a big fan of saunas because not only do they help with detoxification, they promote longevity, reduce risk of heart disease, have a lot of other benefits too. Okay, so glutathione is considered the master antioxidant. This is a crucial compound for liver detox. We have phase 1 and phase 2 liver pathways, and glutathione is essential. And then studies show that autoimmune conditions, people tend to have increased oxidative stress. And because of that, they have reduced antioxidant function. Often they have low glutathione levels. So there are good forms of glutathione orally now, like liposomal and also reduced. Before we had to tell patients to get IV or other glutathione because the oral forms were not widely available. But one good form is liposomal glutathione, where the nutrient is packaged inside a liposome, which is a fat-containing compound that boosts the absorption. And studies do show that taking liposomal glutathione orally is effective at increasing body stores of glutathione, so the absorption is quite good. So I like either liposomal glutathione or reduced glutathione, also known as L-glutathione, has been shown to be effective at elevating serum levels of glutathione. There was a randomized placebo-controlled trial, which found that daily intake of reduced glutathione raised body stores of glutathione effectively and reduced markers of oxidative stress. So this is another option as well for glutathione. So those are some ways to address toxins. Now let's talk about infections. So my approach with the Tiger protocol is not to focus too much on the bug. In Western medicine, that's kind of our focus: find the germ, find the right drug to kill that germ. But my approach is more to make your body environment, like the inner terrain of the body, inhospitable to pathogens. And then that will allow your immune system to then come in and take care of whatever is there. One of the ways you can do that is ensuring an acidic intestinal pH, because that limits the growth of dysbiotic bacteria and yeast, harmful microbes, candida. They're often very pH dependent in their growth. And different areas of the body have different optimal pH, but for the intestine, you want it to be a little bit acidic, so below 7, which is neutral. And one of the biggest contributors to that acidic pH are those short chain fatty acids. So remember, they're called acids, and they're produced by your healthy bacteria. So as long as they're improving your microbiome, they can acidify that intestinal pH in order to make your body inhospitable to infections of all types. I also really like the use of antimicrobial spices and herbs in the diet. Ayurveda is very strong in this area. So all different types, ginger, turmeric, garlic, of course, excellent. So one tip for garlic is to crush it and then wait about 10 minutes for the active ingredients like allicin to be synthesized before using. After 10 minutes, it's more heat stable. Then, it takes that long for the enzymes to produce those active compounds. If you're not doing this, then you're still getting the flavor of garlic, but you're not getting as much of those therapeutic compounds. And then the spice called black cumin has been shown to be beneficial in Hashimoto's. It's a broad spectrum antimicrobial as well as an anti-inflammatory. It's different from regular cumin, but black cumin can be found in Indian grocery stores. You can put it in a peppercorn grinder and grind it just like you would black pepper, on any dish. I also really like ajwain, which is pictured there on the lower right. Ajwain is a seed that stimulates the digestive fire, according to Ayurveda. And also there's research showing that it's an effective antimicrobial. It's pretty selective, in a good way. It kills the harmful bacteria and does not affect the good bacteria. So ajwain is an excellent antimicrobial spice as well. Now, turmeric is best known for its anti-inflammatory effects, but is a surprisingly potent antimicrobial. So you may not be aware, but research shows that it's got significant antibacterial, antiviral, antifungal effects. And of course, the anti-inflammatory effects are pretty remarkable too. So a study involving patients with rheumatoid arthritis found that curcumin, which is a turmeric extract, was as effective as an anti-inflammatory drug called diclofenac at reducing pain and disease activity in RA. So that was pretty striking. Now let's talk about the gut and healing the gut microbiome. So remember, we need to address dysbiosis, leaky gut, and reduced diversity. So to address the dysbiosis, we will focus on reducing overgrowth of pathogens. And then for the gut, we want to heal the increased intestinal permeability. And for the reduced diversity, we want to eat right as part of the phase 2 diet, which is high in prebiotic foods that are known to boost that diversity of the microbiome long term. And then as part of the addressing infections, you recall I talked about acidifying the intestinal pH in order to reverse dysbiosis and boost beneficial bacteria. Some good foods to support the gut for this are bone broth, fermented foods, prebiotic foods and fibers, and supplements such as glutamine, which is an amino acid that is well studied for ability to heal leaky gut and support the microbiome. So the best way to increase production of these short chain fatty acids is a high fiber diet with a diverse blend of plenty of plant fibers, because that will be used by the good bacteria to produce those short chain fatty acids, which are key for the health of your entire body. Here's another example about how these factors interact. So a robust microbiome actually can be protective against the effects of toxins. So scientists found that a novel bacteria in kimchi, which is a fermented food, Korean origin, can actually degrade BPA, which is the common environmental toxin found in receipts and plastic water bottles as well. So this bacteria from kimchi actually broke down BPA into harmless compounds. So it just shows that the microbiome can protect you as well by supporting detoxification. So let's talk about eating. That's my favorite subject. So my long-term diet is what I call the phase 2 diet as part of the Tiger protocol. And this is a nutrient-dense diet, which includes prebiotic foods, fermented foods, and increased plant diversity. So remember, we talked about the decline in fiber from our ancestors' intake. They are also evolved eating up to 100 different plant foods every single week in some, hunter-gatherer societies. And each plant food contains different types of nutrients that feed different bacteria in the microbiome. So that's why diversity of plant foods leads to diversity of the microbiome, which is what we want. So we can't go back to eating, 100 different plant foods, but try to eat at least 30 to 40 different plant foods a week, including fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts and seeds, and spices count as well. So, and also different colored foods count separately. So if you're having a red apple, a green apple, and a golden delicious apple, that counts as 3 different plant foods. And each spice counts individually as well. So if you use 10 spices in a week, that's helping you towards this goal. Now, the best tolerated prebiotic foods contain polyphenols. So I wanted to share some tables from my book where I've gone through all the different categories of foods, like, fruits, vegetables, beverages, grains, and broken them down by polyphenol content. Because sometimes people don't tolerate prebiotic foods like garlic and onion or, other, depending on the type of prebiotic. But polyphenols are usually better tolerated even by those patients. So when we look at fruits, we all know blueberry is supposed to be very healthy, but black elderberry has a much higher polyphenol content. So I typically get dried black elderberries, and because it's hard to find them fresh, but they don't lose their polyphenols. And then black currant is closely behind blueberry. And here are some of the other fruits that are very high in polyphenols as well. When it comes to nuts and seeds, actually ground flaxseed is the richest source of polyphenols. And then a close second is actually chestnut. So we typically think of chestnuts as just a holiday food, kind of seasonal, but because they're so high in polyphenols, I think they should be consumed year round because there's a lot of benefit from including chestnuts and other nuts that are high in the polyphenols. So here are prebiotic foods you may not be aware of, and they're broken down by the name of the prebiotic. So in my book, I go through each of these categories like inulin and so forth and give many examples because I think it's helpful to have choices. You don't need to eat all of these foods. You just choose one or two that you tolerate from each category. So with inulin, we have leeks as well as jicama, which is often found in Asian or Hispanic grocery stores. And then next prebiotic is galacto-oligosaccharides or GOS, which is found in black beans, and also Jerusalem artichoke, which is a type of artichoke. It's found often in farmers markets. Regular artichokes are good as well. And then we have resistant starch. So there's type 1, type 2, and type 3. Resistant starch type 1 is contained in certain whole grains like millet, and oats are also a good source. Type 2 is found in plantains or green bananas. Also, potato starch is a source of type 2. And then type 3 is cooked and chilled potatoes or cooked and chilled rice. That's another way you can get resistant starch to feed the microbiome. Basically, for example, with potatoes, you just cook them and then chill them overnight like you were making a potato salad or something like that. And then that will increase the resistant starch content. And finally, arabinogalactans like radish and coconut are also very good prebiotics. And then fermented foods are a good way to boost the microbiome diversity. So there was actually a study from Stanford which showed that 6 weeks of increasing fermented foods in adults significantly reduced inflammation and also improved 19 markers of immune system dysregulation. So because it was a research setting, they had access to a lot more blood tests to look at the immune system than we do in conventional medicine. And they found that 19 markers of the immune system improved as a result of the fermented food intake. And also it enhanced the diversity of the microbiome, which we know is important for so many reasons. So again, not necessary to have like a huge quantity, but even a small amount consistently and a couple, 2, 3 different types of fermented foods in a week would be a good way to incorporate them. And finally, rest. So some of the tools for optimizing rest. I'm a big fan of meditation, but there are many other options, and meditation is not for everyone. But in the research, strategies that have been shown to be helpful are psychotherapy, counseling, biofeedback, guided imagery, mindfulness-based stress reduction or regular mindfulness practice, deep breathing, and hypnosis. Now, I'm a fan of meditation because of neuroplasticity, which is how your brain structure can physically change from certain practices. So research on participants doing an 8-week mindfulness meditation program found increased gray matter in the hippocampus and the cingulate cortex. And another study showed expansion of white matter brain regions, especially those that govern emotional reactivity. So your brain has both white matter and gray matter, and meditation increases the amount of both. Plus, it increases the size of the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain involved in cognition and decision making. Regular practice of meditation seems to shrink the amygdala, which is known as the fear center of the brain. And it's thought that this is one of the ways that meditation works to reduce reactivity to stress and enhance resilience and emotional skillfulness. Now, surprisingly, meta-analysis of multiple studies show that meditation may help with weight loss and also inflammation. So, meditation consistently reduces cortisol levels, which is a stress hormone associated with storing fat in our abdomen area, especially belly fat. Um, Also, it reduces C-reactive protein levels, which is a blood marker of inflammation. So, the benefits of meditation are not just emotional and mental; they are physical as well. But in terms of the brain benefits, it's also linked to improved attention and awareness, increased amount of gray and white matter, and reduced age-related atrophy. So what that refers to is in the normal aging process, every year we have a loss of brain cells, but it's found that meditation can actually prevent that. So it diminishes the negative impact of aging on the brain and can help keep the brain stronger as you get older. So let's review the implementation of the Tiger Protocol. So first, we're going to detoxify and improve liver function. Then focus on infections, eliminating infections, helping your immune system to take care of whatever is there. We'll be healing your gut and the oral microbiome. Focus on eating with the phase 2 diet, which is the very diverse diet, and then incorporate some tools for optimizing rest. So, what are the next steps after someone goes through and implements a lot of these steps in the Tiger Protocol? Well, then you can bring in strategies to modulate the immune system that will work a lot better because now you've addressed these 5 root causes. And one of my favorite strategies is fasting. So, there's good research on rheumatoid arthritis. A review of 4 controlled studies showed that fasting in RA is likely to be beneficial. Psoriasis, the skin condition, study of 100 people doing intermittent fasting for 30 days found that the skin significantly improved over that time. Also, with multiple sclerosis, a randomized trial in patients with MS found that something called the fasting mimicking diet, FMD, was safe and actually associated with improvements in quality of life measures. Also, animal studies with MS confirmed that fasting mimicking diet is a 5-day low calorie diet designed to mimic the effects of fasting, but including some foods. It was developed by Walter Longo, who's a researcher in longevity, and it's quite promising. Now, what to do if you're not getting better with all of these steps? Well, there are many other options to consider. One is low dose naltrexone, which is a compounded medicine that in integrative medicine we use a very low dose to reduce inflammation and reduce autoimmunity. Naltrexone is used in conventional medicine at high doses for addictions, but in low doses has a completely different property, and we often see improvement in inflammation and autoimmunity that way. Also, low-level laser light therapy, such as red light therapy, can be very beneficial. PEMF, pulsed electromagnetic field therapy, can be very helpful for reducing pain and inflammation, just like laser light therapy. And then you might want to look into other areas that if you're not improving, might be good to evaluate for SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which is associated with certain autoimmune conditions and also GI symptoms. You might want to investigate your hormones, get some more detailed testing, consult an integrative medicine practitioner, and finally, trying a different modality. Maybe try traditional Chinese medicine or Ayurveda, because each of those are complete systems that can offer different approach that sometimes is very helpful. Now, we do have to acknowledge that there are racial and ethnic disparities in autoimmunity. So, non white women were found to develop lupus at a younger age, have more complications, and die from it on average 13 years earlier than Caucasian women. Same issue with multiple sclerosis and other autoimmune diseases is that minority populations have poorer outcomes due to these what are called social determinants of health. Same held true for autoimmune hepatitis. So that's an important factor to consider. And then there are disparities in the root causes of autoimmunity that are unique to different populations. So scientists have looked at African American populations, especially women, and found that some of the products marketed to them, like hair straightening products, skin lightening creams, were found to have high levels of toxins. And that was written about in this paper called The Environmental Injustice of Beauty. Now, one thing as well that I think is very important from a high level is mindset, because your beliefs and your mindset. So let's take the example: your beliefs about stress actually change your physiology during stressful events. There are some ingenious experiments where they've studied that, and um, it is true that stress can be harmful and damaging in excess and disrupt your health. But it's equally true that stress can enhance performance, boost focus, boost your energy for maximum productivity. And which of these you focus on actually was shown in a study to change the physiology. And if I had to summarize it, I would say that the one approach is the stress is enhancing mindset, and the other one is the stress is debilitating mindset. And focusing on the stress is enhancing mindset is what I recommend, because that actually can improve your physiology during stressful events, improve your cortisol responses, and all these things. So your mindset has such a powerful impact, not only on stress, but even diet and sleep and other very important areas. Now, coming down the line, there are some experimental therapies that are really promising for autoimmune disease. One is stem cells. So stem cells typically are known because they can differentiate to become all kinds of different types of cells, but they also help keep inflammation under control and work a lot to repair and regenerate damaged tissue. So there was one study of a stem cell infusion in treatment refractory RA patients, which led to significant clinical improvement compared to placebo. A single IV infusion had benefits lasting 10 months, so almost a year, which is much better than our current IV therapies for autoimmune disease might last 4, 6, maximum 8 weeks. So 10 weeks was pretty remarkable. Other therapies that are being studied, the BCG vaccine is actually a vaccine against tuberculosis, but it seems to have immune modulating effect, and scientists at Harvard are looking at that for autoimmune disease. There's an implantable vagus nerve stimulator that has shown good early research in rheumatoid arthritis and inflammatory bowel disease. The vagus nerve is one of the main nerves in your parasympathetic nervous system, which calms your body and counteracts the effects of stress. Of course, meditation, deep breathing, exercise, all of these things activate the vagus nerve. But for additional benefit in patients with these autoimmune conditions, an implanted vagus nerve stimulator, which is about the size of a pager, was found to have pretty significant benefit. There's also a PONS device. This is a currently FDA approved in multiple sclerosis to help with gait and balance. It's a portable tongue stimulator that then has that neuroplasticity effects on the brain. And finally, there's CAR T cells, the chimeric antigen receptor T cells, which is a type of immunotherapy that's being studied in cancers and also autoimmune diseases. So yeah, I know I covered a lot of information. For further reading, you can check out my book, The Tiger Protocol, which just launched. And I do believe in food as medicine. So it has about 35 plus recipes from my kitchen that my wife and I put together. You can also connect with me through my website or social media at Dr. Akil, DoctorAkil, on all the usual channels like Facebook, Instagram, and so forth. So yeah, so I'll pause here and turn it back over to Dr. Downs to see if there are any questions.
Yes, what I will do is I'll go through the questions that I've taken off the chat.
Sure.
But if you raise your hand, I will answer those first. I will ask you first to unmute and do that. So until I see some hand, and there's some issue with Zoom that I might not see all the questions in there. Oh, here we go. Okay, Richard, you're up. Yes, Richard. Richard, please ask your question.
Oh, sorry, my mic was off. Does your protocol regress a colon tumor?
Oh, can you repeat the question?
Does your protocol regress a colon tumor, a tumor in the colon?
Oh, got it. So yeah, colon cancer. Yeah, that's a good question. No, I don't think it regresses, tumors in the colon, but it definitely can prevent them. And also, so it goes back to that issue of pH in the intestine and the colon, because one of the factors with colon tumors is too high of a pH. So if you follow the protocol, which will acidify the intestinal pH, that might hinder the growth of the tumor. And certainly that's been linked with prevention of colon cancer.
Laura.
Yes, hi, thank you so much. My question to you is, I found out that I cannot have fermented vegetables or wine. I don't break it down, is what they're telling me.
Okay.
So is there something else that I could take or do?
Yes. So I think the prebiotic foods are a great option in that case, because those are not fermented, and then they're equally, if not more, beneficial for the microbiome. So yeah, like I talked about many options for prebiotic foods, and I've listed like hundreds of them in my book to give people choices.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Now I'm going through some of the questions. What mineral supplements do you recommend adding back after reverse osmosis? If you don't add back, I mean, this person says that minerals are pulled from the bones drinking reverse osmosis. I know that happens with zeolite, but I didn't know about reverse osmosis. So if you could address that.
Yes. Yeah, that's a common misconception, I think, because while it is true that reverse osmosis removes minerals from the water, it doesn't remove them completely. So there are still trace amounts of minerals in the water. There's no effect of depleting depleting your minerals from your bones or anywhere else. And the thing with minerals in water is that they're much more relevant in developing countries where because of malnutrition, you don't get the basic minerals in the foods. And in those cases, the minerals in water are very important, like magnesium and calcium, whatever, because even those tiny amounts are very significant. But here in the West, because we have a healthy diet, food by far is the overwhelming source of minerals for us. So we don't need the trace amount of minerals in the water. But even with reverse osmosis, it's not making it zero. It's just significantly reducing, and I don't believe there's a negative effect from that.
There's a question here, and where do we find cadmium? I mean, it's in some foods, even chocolate, along with lead. Where do we find cadmium?
Yeah, I think the two biggest sources are seafood. So especially if it's not wild caught, that is one of the sources. And then secondly is the chocolate, like even dark chocolate, unfortunately. I know, but I'm still eating dark chocolate. It's not something that is preventing me from eating it, but just, enhance, keep doing all your detox practices.
Would organic dark chocolate minimize the risk of cadmium, or avoiding chocolate from certain regions, would that help minimize the cadmium?
Yeah, they've studied that, and it doesn't appear that organic is a way to guarantee reduced exposure to toxins, and also the location doesn't necessarily affect it. It's also about like processing and other factors you wouldn't think about. But there are websites that have done independent testing and found the brands that are lowest in the heavy metals. And on my website, I have an article in my blog about chocolate and heavy metals, which lists a link to the study where you can find the brands that are good and low in some of those good options. Yeah, and some of them are organic, some are not, but they do have independent tests available.
You recall some of those brands offhand?
Yeah, I remember, I know the brand, I think Endangered Species chocolate was one. Yeah, I can't remember like the others, but I know there were many that I list in my blog post on this issue.
Okay, now smoking has cadmium
Mhm.
in it because one person
Yes.
commented that ex-smokers are heavy in that toxicity.
Yes, and smoking is one of the big risk factors for multiple autoimmune diseases, not only because of cadmium, but multiple other toxins as well.
Yeah, smoking not good. Um, let's see. There's a question if TBC vaccination might have an impact on type 2 diabetes. I understand that toxins very heavily affect diabetes, extremely heavily.
Yep.
But what about vaccinations?
Oh, well, actually, that question refers to the TB vaccine, which is the
Oh, the TB.
BCG
Okay.
vaccine. And that's
Okay.
actually being studied as a treatment for type 2 diabetes because it's unlike most other vaccines, it has more of a modulating effect on the immune system. That's the one that's being studied at Harvard. And, the evidence is accumulating for how that might be helpful. It looks like somebody has raised their hand.
Yes.
Should we
So
call on them?
yes, we will make.
Sherry,
Okay. So
Sherry Mark.
Sherry, you're on.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I'm wondering if you, Dr. Akil, is taking new patients, and if not, if you can recommend any doctors in the Bay Area who
Yes.
deal with functional medicine in the Sutter, in your
Mhm.
Sutter network.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I work at the Sutter Institute for Health and Healing in Sacramento, and I'm not taking new patients one-on-one, but I am taking new patients through these shared medical appointments, which are with groups of patients done virtually through Zoom. So that's a possibility. But we also have Sutter Institute for Health and Healing in San Francisco and also San Carlos. And each of those have several physicians that do functional medicine. All of them are excellent at both locations.
Okay, thank you. And you think they're taking new patients in San Carlos?
Yes, I would call them. Typically there's a waiting list of a few months, but yeah, they are taking new patients.
Okay, thank you.
Now, in the chat, there's some discussion of raw milk. Now, I know milk can be an issue and it can be inflammatory, and some people can be lactose intolerant. Some people are advocating raw milk, which Weston Price advocates and say it's the only complete food that has all the enzymes you need to digest it. So what are your comments on raw milk? I mean, somebody was worried about getting microbacteria from the cows, which I did in Bangladesh, but we're not in
Oh,
Bangladesh.
yeah.
So what are your
Right.
comments on raw food, on raw milk?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing that matters is the source. So you definitely, I would definitely not risk raw milk from like a conventional dairy, where it's very different the situation. But if you have a farm or have access to a farm where you can see the cow, you can get the milk, and guarantee kind of the freshness and the quality, then I do think like any food, you have to test it out. And the only way to do that is elimination diet of dairy followed by reintroduction. And for some people, it's very helpful. Yes, you do have a higher risk of infection, so you have to be careful with the food safety perspective. But I think it's worth trying, just like with any other food, with normal elimination and reintroduction.
One viewer correctly commented that she was told leaky gut can result from excess cortisol. It can result from stress, airplane rides.
Yes.
It's very easy to get to a leaky gut. So she comments that she realized that's why she keeps getting leaky gut and so careful about what she eats and then feels anxious most of the time. Any comments?
Well, that is true. Yeah, we do know stress is a trigger for leaky gut and increased intestinal permeability. So, the body's always regenerating. We are designed to heal from these kind of like daily exposures to stress and leaky gut. So, as long as your baseline diet is very healthy, with a lot of plant foods, fermented foods, prebiotic foods, you will heal whatever occurs from that stress. And then incorporate a regular stress reduction practice like meditation or something that mitigates the effects of stress.
Okay. One person, this gets into an interesting topic, asked what inflammatory biomarkers are needed to check for long COVID symptoms. So anyway, to modify that a bit, what would you suggest with long COVID?
Yeah, so we don't have a lot of research for long COVID. Generally, for autoimmune diseases, it's thought long COVID is autoimmune in mechanism. We test, we only have a couple of blood tests available, which are the C-reactive protein and then the ESR, which is erythrocyte sedimentation rate. So those are the two that are available, but it's not clear in long COVID whether, what role they play.
Yeah, C-reactive protein is for inflammation, as is the
Yes.
ESR. Okay. On the topic of heavy metals, one person commented that most people have a high, was told that there's high aluminum content, which I imagine could be from chemtrails. Also, commenting on that, I also one person recommended Fiji water can help get some of the aluminum out. So tell us about how to deal with the heavy metal aluminum.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think we don't have enough data to know whether certain types of water, like the Fiji water, are helpful, but we do have data that sweating is a good way to excrete most heavy metals. So sweating in a sauna, steam room, infrared sauna, any of those are equally good and going to be more powerful than sweating from exercise for the detoxification of heavy metals like aluminum.
When you do a sauna, do you have to wipe the sweat off afterwards so it doesn't go back and the toxins don't go back into the body?
Typically, I do recommend that, and then taking a shower, just it's not going to be immediate, the reabsorption, but as long as you get into the shower within, 5-10 minutes, I think that would be sufficient.
Another comment that I've heard is that deodorants used to be very high in aluminum, and that just goes right in. Okay, somebody asked about, is caffeine-free green tea okay? Because it seems that this person has a sensitivity to caffeine.
Yes, absolutely. In green tea, the beneficial compounds are all not related to caffeine, like polyphenols, like EGCG, so equally found in caffeine-free green tea.
So would you recommend organic green tea bags? Because I've seen green tea powders.
Yeah, either. So the green tea powders are the matcha powders, which are very concentrated sources of polyphenols because they have the whole tea leaf. You need like a much smaller quantity. And also equally good are just green tea bags, where you're brewing the green tea. So I actually use both. I like both the matcha tea and regular green tea bags.
Somebody asked about chlorella vulgaris or chlorella pyridinosa. Can that help eliminate toxins? I know Dr. Klinghardt loves chlorella, and other people say, well, it just kind of moves it around and it seems to be mixed. So is the chlorella safe for all, even those who take blood pressure medications, or will these meds get bound out as well?
Oh, yeah, I do like chlorella. I think there is some research, not like definitive, but it does suggest that chlorella might help with heavy metals, with helping detox of those. And then it is true because it's a binder. You don't want to have it together with prescription drugs or, calcium or other things like that. So if you're having chlorella for the detox benefits, and you're also on prescription medicines, you want to be sure there's at least 4 hours apart. But I like chlorella for its detox benefit. And I always recommend starting with a low dose because even some people are sensitive to it. It can upset your stomach, but start with a low dose and just a little bit of the powder is probably helpful.
We have a question of how to measure one's glutathione levels.
Yeah, so actually you can have that ordered by your doctor to be done in any regular lab, like a Sutter lab, LabCorp, Quest. All of them offer a glutathione blood level. It just needs to be ordered by your physician, so you could ask for that. Well,
some places we can order directly, like direct labs, so perhaps we can also try that.
Perhaps, yeah. Yes,
Okay.
Good idea.
Now, somebody asked about L-glutamine for a leaky gut.
Yeah, there's great research for L-glutamine, which is an amino acid for leaky gut in a variety of different scenarios. So I really like L-glutamine. I think it's a good option that is a complementary to all the other things like fermented foods and prebiotic foods, bone broth. It should be taken on an empty stomach and better absorbed that way, but also extremely safe. They've given high doses of L-glutamine to patients without any adverse effect.
Are chia seeds good for your gut?
Oh, very good. Yeah, they're actually high in fiber, so good for the microbiome, and also high in omega-3, which is the anti-inflammatory essential fatty acids, the good fats. So yeah, I do like chia seeds. Ground flax seeds, the same, equally good.
Okay. We have some questions on detox, but I'm going to save those for the end.
Okay.
Then one person asked, what do you think of alkaline water? For example, this person takes it for GERD, which is esophageal
Oh,
reflux.
yeah. Some patients do find benefit from it. I don't think we have a lot of research to know that it's particularly beneficial for the body. So I think, it is filtered and purified, which is probably the biggest benefit. And then you get a few extra minerals and electrolytes. So I don't think there's a huge effect, but some patients do find it helpful.
Now, here's a question. I know we've touched upon it, but I just keep asking it because I want a different answer, I guess. Is organic dark chocolate okay?
Yes, it's certainly better in terms of other like pesticide exposures because of or being organic, and then I would just recommend, yeah, looking at those studies that have been done on which brands of organic chocolate are the lowest in heavy metals. Because I'm also not eliminating chocolate. In fact, I eat it every day. So.
Me too. Now, the next question, somebody wants a test to confirm autoimmunity, but my understanding is you look for the particular antibodies that you're looking
Yes.
for. And there are some places like Cyrus Labs that you can do that. And we developed the antibodies, I understand, like a decade or more before the disease pops up. So I think Cyrus Labs and maybe some others, you can measure antibodies to different things. I mean, even
Yes.
the antibodies, even you can get antibodies to part of your brain, which is scary. So anyway, I'll
Yes.
pop this
Mhm.
question to you. Is there a recommended test to confirm autoimmunity?
Yeah, I also like the one from Cyrex Labs, which I believe checks for more than 20 different autoimmune antibodies. So these are called autoantibodies, meaning autoimmune antibodies. And you can, get some of them done through a regular lab. You can also look at the C-reactive protein and the ESR, which are both inflammation markers. That can be a clue. If one of them is elevated, then it would lead to further workup. So you can definitely talk with your doctor about commonly available autoimmune antibody tests like rheumatoid factor, anti-nuclear antibody, ANA, that's also widely available. So starting with those is also a good option if you don't have access to the Cyrex Labs test.
Now, this is a local problem, but you might have some insight to it. I mean, one of the viewers, wants a functional medicine doctor, but her insurance is through Alignment, only Sutter Health, and no one's taking new patients. So how does she find a functional medicine doctor? And she's got to pay for functional medicine doctors and complementary doctors, which is always a problem.
Mhm.
And somebody else asked
Yes.
about functional doctors between San Jose, Carmel, and Monterey. Help us.
Oh, yes, yes, absolutely. Well, let me put in the chat the name of a doctor who I know is taking new patients, Babak Kanani, and this is his email. He actually worked in Sutter before, and yeah, so B Kanani MD, Dr. Kanani. He's now in Grass Valley. He has a private practice, but he offers video visits. And the reason I like him is I think his fees are the most reasonable of anyone I've heard of, very affordable. And he's very skilled in functional medicine. And yeah, that is a big challenge because through insurance plans, it's very hard to get connected with a functional medicine doctor. I think that is a definite problem that we need to address to improve access. But if people are having trouble finding one, I think Dr. Kanani is a good option. And I see in the chat as well, Dr. Gina Serioko in San Carlos might be a good option. Yeah, I don't know if she is taking new patients or what her waiting list is like, but I know Dr. Kanani is taking new patients, so that's one option.
Okay. There are some more questions on detox, but I'll save that to the end. Somebody's asking about serapeptase.
Mhm.
Does that
Oh.
help?
Yeah, actually, serapeptase is one of those things we look at for long COVID because we do know with long COVID and COVID in general, the hypercoagulability, meaning like making more, blood clotting more likely, making the blood thicker is likely one of the mechanisms. And so serapeptase is a natural blood thinner. Another one is nattokinase. That is one of the treatments we do consider.
Also lumbar kinase.
Yeah, and lumbar kinase too. Yeah.
So here's the same question. We all want a different answer. What about Green and Black's organic chocolate?
I don't recall. I would suggest checking that study. I'm sure they might have looked at that because I know that's a common brand, but yeah.
NAD supplement to help with autoimmune. It should help with just about anything to get the blood going, etc.
Yeah, I don't think we have studies to really answer the question yet about NAD and autoimmune disease. Certainly a very promising supplement. I have some patients that swear by it. Hopefully we'll get some research to answer that question, in the years ahead.
Now we have some people asking about detox in the body, which incorporates a lot of things you say, and we can add things like oil pulling and brushing the body and sauna, etc. But anyway, one person has a particular question about mercury poisoning from amalgam fillings. Oh, by the way, Silicon Valley is having trouble. We're being censored up the wazoo on YouTube. One of the issues was you can't say that mercury fillings affects your health because WHO doesn't like it. That was removed. We had a video removed. What's in our food? That was removed. We're getting a lot of strikes against us, so we're struggling where to put these videos. But anybody wants a copy of this, I'll send it to you. I'll edit it tonight. But anyway, somebody's had mercury poisoning since she was a kid, and she's been trying to detox for years and hasn't been able to get it much down.
Okay.
I think I've had a little bit of luck with Klinghart's foot bath, at least according to the last whatever the test it is you do with your palm.
Right.
But no, maybe not. So what do you do to get mercury out?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely can be challenging. I think you do want to work with a biological dentist to safely remove all the mercury containing fillings. I think that would be the good first step. And you want to work with the ideally, if your regular dentist is trained in, biological dentistry, that would be fine. If not, I recommend seeking out someone specifically trained in detoxing and removing amalgams, because if it's not done right, that can actually lead to a big exposure during the process of removal. So you have to be pretty careful. And then once they're removed, it can be a slow process. I think glutathione might be helpful in terms of antioxidant and mercury detox support. And then sweating, like a sauna, has been proven to excrete mercury. So over time, it might be helpful. But if you're really needing, to detox a lot of heavy metals, you might need like a lot of time in a sauna, like 30 minutes every day. That I do have some patients that need to do that much. It's not just like, once a week you do it for 10 minutes and you're done.
And I assume that if you don't sweat in that sauna, that it's not that helpful.
Yeah, you have to be in there long enough to sweat, and for that can vary. Some people need, 20, 30, 40 minutes. That's whatever you need to sweat is necessary. And
a very good functional and naturopathic dentist here in the Bay Area is Dr. Yoshida in Fremont.
Great.
So Dr. Yoshida in Fremont is a very good doctor. He's got some naturopathic credential associated with dentistry, and they don't use fluorides and they don't take shots and stuff. So I would recommend them. Oh, okay. Somebody asked about drinking from plastic. Now, BPA, they'll say BPA free, but it's got BPU, BPS, which is just as harmful.
Yeah.
Please talk us
Yes.
about drinking from plastic. And it's worse if you keep them in the heat.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're right. Because a lot of the BPA free products now have BPS, which might be equally bad, if not worse. And then with the other issue with water in plastic bottles is the microplastics. So I don't recommend long-term consumption of the water bottles with water. So certainly, if you're traveling, that's probably, and the country where the water supply is questionable, then that makes sense. I drink water from plastic bottles when traveling to India or other countries. But in terms of like regular everyday intake, I recommend just getting a good filter for your house and just filtering the municipal tap water.
What filters do you recommend? I mean, how do you get fluoride out?
Yeah, so I think some reverse osmosis systems can do that. I know with the Berkey water filter as well, you can include an option to have fluoride filtered. So either of those options. Yeah.
Okay. What about the nice adjunctive complementary approach with homeopathy?
Oh yeah, potentially very good. I think I would group it in that category of like alternative medical systems, like traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, homeopathy. I think that it's definitely worth pursuing if you are interested in trying a different approach and just seeing a trained practitioner to guide you through that.
Jen Eltman adds, the Consumer Labs ran a follow-up article on the Consumer Reports on toxins in dark chocolate. Clarified the findings. It was less serious, but sadly, darker chocolate tends to have more toxins, but it's also healthier.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay, and let's see. And the person has not been able to get their mercury down. I mean, saunas and whatever. What type of sauna is better, far infrared or near infrared?
I think both are actually equally good. As far as we have seen in studies, the type of sauna does not seem to matter. They've compared, both of those to steam sauna to regular dry sauna. So I think it actually doesn't matter. Whatever you're able to have access to is the best thing. So I wouldn't let the perfect be the enemy of the good in that case. Just find whatever sauna you can access and then use that.
Now, what about the mustard powder enzymes? Can that decrease the negative impact of FODMAP food on the gut of a person with SIBO?
Oh, no. So with SIBO or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, often it's recommended to be on a low FODMAP diet. So that includes certain foods that are high in what are called FODMAPs that feed the bacteria. And unfortunately, no, the mustard seed powder, it does not address FODMAPs. It does boost the sulforaphane. The enzymes help your broccoli to get a lot more sulforaphane, but it's not going to break down the FODMAPs inherent in those foods. So in those cases, yeah, you have to just stick more with the low FODMAP diet while you are treating the SIBO. And then ideally, you want to be able to expand the diet. So maybe do 3 months on the low FODMAP diet, get the SIBO treated, and then start expanding, because it's also not healthy to be on a low FODMAP diet for life, because then you're limiting the large intestine microbiome in its diversity. And we know that's one of the key metrics for health.
Okay. Now, if anybody has any specific questions, raise your hand. Otherwise, we've got general questions on how to detox. Well, I think the first thing is to avoid getting more toxins. Watch what you put in your food. Don't put crappy chemicals on your body because they go right in. Oh God, the fragrances, avoid those. But general detox, and then the person is still struggling with the mercury. She's tried everything you've talked about and can't get her mercury levels down. So just general on detox.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So in that case, I definitely recommend working with a practitioner, because it is true. It is challenging to detoxify from these heavy metals and mercury. lead and so forth. And yeah, definitely working with a good practitioner. And I like some of these other strategies like the oil pulling, the dry skin brushing, even tongue scraping. These are all Ayurvedic practices that are very helpful for detox. Plus massage, just moving the lymphatic tissue, yoga and massage, our qigong, they're all helpful for that. So I think we should not forget the lymphatics when we talk about detox. And some of those strategies I've described just now will help the lymphatic system as well. So.
Okay, a question. Do prebiotic foods and rest help with Crohn's? I imagine that's going to help with everything, but what's your answer?
Yeah, with Crohn's disease, which is autoimmune bowel disease, definitely the microbiome is implicated. So prebiotic foods are very beneficial to support that. And then stress has been shown to be a trigger in inflammatory bowel disease. So I think mindfulness meditation has been studied in Crohn's disease to be especially helpful for changing gene expression towards, reduced inflammation and better immune markers. So yeah, meditation might be especially good, but any kind of stress reduction practice is likely to be helpful.
And there's a comment that purifex.com has a filter that works with chloramine and one that works with fluoride. She loves their filter. And the manager on the phone will help you with your situations. And then there's another question. Any good filters that take out chloramine?
Oh, yeah, I think that, you do have to check that certain reverse osmosis systems will remove chloramine. So you just have to check with the company, make sure. But I'm pretty sure the Berkey water filter also does. You can check with the manufacturers on those.
So no other questions. Any final comments? We really thank you. I loved your book. There's so many little things, little details in it that I found absolutely fascinating. So I love your questions. I love your book, love the details in it. So I recommend it. Oh, somebody wants to know about vitamin KM7.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I think vitamin K2 is very important for health. And one of the forms of vitamin K2 that's been studied is called MK7. And vitamin K2 is part of a three-legged stool in the body with calcium and vitamin D for your bone health, your inflammation. And vitamin K2 is not found in many foods. Organ meats, which a lot of us don't eat, do have it. Some fermented foods can carry it. And then natto, which is a fermented soybean dish from Japan, is actually the richest food source of vitamin K2. And I do eat that sometimes. You can find it in Asian or Japanese grocery stores. The taste is very strong, so you have to be warned. A lot of people hate the taste and can't stand it. But if you don't want to eat a food with vitamin K2, then a lot of the newer vitamin D supplements contain vitamin K2 because companies are recognizing the synergy between those. So I would just recommend switching over to a vitamin D that contains vitamin K2. And a lot of supplements out there have vitamin K1, which is not the same. So just make sure it's vitamin D3 with vitamin K2.
Well, this has been fabulous. The audience is making comments to that effect. We love your wisdom. I find it's fascinating. I mean, it's just so many nuggets in your book. I mean, there are just so many nuggets. It was almost overwhelming. So I thank you for all the information, as does the group. I want to thank you, and you've been fabulous, and love your information, and I can't praise you enough. So thank you.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome. Thank you again, Dr. Susan, for having me on. And yeah, thanks to everyone for tuning in. And I'm glad that it was a useful session. So.